Hey, everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's me here, and thank you so much for stopping by today. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and I'm grateful that you're taking time out of your busy schedule to watch my videos. But today, we're going to talk about something that many people do not really talk about or understand, and that is the long road back. Many veterans have been gone from civilian society for an extended period of time. Some have been deployed overseas multiple times, and when they come home, it can be one of the hardest things that they will ever do. Coming home might feel like a victory, but getting reacquainted with civilian life can become a daily uphill climb. There are invisible obstacles around every corner, and many of them are self-inflicted. In fact, there are 6 things that I believe make this transition especially difficult. Number 6. Loss of identity. You see, being in the military creates a strong sense of identity and belonging. From the moment you ship off to basic training, everything that you do, everything that you wear, who you hang out with, even how you think is regulated. And for some people this is really difficult because when you take away someone's identity, who are they? They lose themselves. When you enter the military, you leave behind the life that you once knew, at least the life that you were living before you joined. And then you start from ground zero again. You learn about what it means to be a sailor, a soldier, or an airman. You learn about your core values. You're placed into units and you work with different people and you forge these lifelong bonds. You get a sense of accomplishment. You start to understand your strengths and weaknesses. But when you transition out, all of a sudden, who am I now? What do I do? Where do I go? What's important to me? It can lead to a loss of self. Many veterans struggle with this. So, if you're struggling with this, know that you're not alone. Number 5. Lack of communication skills. Military members are trained to write clearly and concisely because if a message isn't clear, it could result in death or destruction. For example, if a pilot doesn't properly communicate with air traffic control, it could lead to disaster. If a medic doesn't communicate effectively with the patient or other medical professionals, lives could be lost. And if a sailor doesn't follow the orders given by the chain of command, everyone could suffer the consequences. So because effective communication is critical across all branches of the military, most service members become very good at communicating and writing, but many of them struggle to communicate orally, which is why I was always the guy who was asked to do the oral reports, because I was pretty good at it. But here's the problem. In order to be a good communicator, you have to be able to speak just as well as you do in writing. The spoken word can convey emotion, inflection, tone, and all of those things are important because miscommunication happens all the time in civilian life. And when you throw in poor communication skills, it can lead to disastrous results. Imagine going to the bank and telling the teller to give someone a $100 bill. Number 4. Poor impulse control. Impulse control is defined as the ability to resist the temptation to perform an action with immediate gratification. And in the military, impulse control is key because you don't do everything that you want to do all the time. And if you did, you could get yourself in a lot of trouble. Service members can't just walk off the job without facing severe consequences. We can't talk back to our bosses without getting in trouble. And we can't steal government property without being sent to jail. But let's take a step back and examine why this can be a problem for veterans. A lot of us have sacrificed a lot, including time with friends and family, certain privileges, and we've put our lives on hold in order to serve our country. And when we finally transition out, some of us may find ourselves making questionable decisions because we've never had the opportunity to explore our options. Think about it. When a service member goes to a bar and starts talking to someone, do they ask where they're from, what they do, what their plans are? No, they ask, "Are you in the military?" Because if you're not, then nothing else matters. So when veterans leave the military, they have to relearn how to socialize. And sometimes it can be difficult. And that lack of impulse control can cause problems. No. 3. Difficulty asking for help. I think this is one of the biggest problems that veterans deal with because asking for help is a sign of weakness, and we pride ourselves on being strong and being able to handle anything that gets thrown our way. But you know what? There's nothing wrong with asking for help. I mean, that's what friends are for, right? When you're in the military, you learn to solve problems on your own. If you have an issue with your uniform, you figure out a way to fix it. If you have a personal problem, you deal with it on your own because you don't want to be seen as weak or a complainer. And it's not because your friends or family don't want to help. It's because you've made them feel like they can't offer their support. And after doing that for so long, it becomes second nature, even after you leave the military. This is why veterans are one of the most underserved populations when it comes to mental health services. Many of them don't even consider talking to someone, even though they may need it. Many of them feel like it's a sign of weakness. But guess what? Reaching out for help is a sign of strength. 2. Civilian bureaucracy. I know this is going to get some pushback, but I firmly believe that civilian bureaucracy is more frustrating than military bureaucracy. The Department of Veterans Affairs has its problems, and I've had my share of dealing with incompetent people. But I think most veterans would agree that dealing with the VA is easier than dealing with the DMV or trying to get a human being at the IRS. You see, when you're in the military, if you need something done, there's a chain of command that you can follow in order to get it done. And if that fails, you have other options. But when you're a veteran, if you need to get something done, you have to wait on hold for hours sometimes to get a human, only to tell you that they're not going to help you. You might even get passed around from one department to another until your issue is eventually resolved, if it's ever resolved. So yeah, I agree that military bureaucracy can be frustrating, but I firmly believe that civilian bureaucracy is worse. Number 1. Finding a job. Finding a job is stressful for anyone, but it can be especially difficult for veterans because some employers don't understand what we do. In the military, most of us don't have college degrees. Many of us have been out of the workforce for a while, and many of us have gaps in our employment history due to our deployments. But you know what? All of those things can be overcome. And as a veteran myself, I can tell you that no matter what career you're in, you're going to face challenges. Some of those challenges can be overcome with additional training or certifications, but many of them can be overcome with a positive attitude. Here's the thing. Civilian employers aren't looking for someone with military training. They're looking for someone who can fill a position. If you have the skills and qualifications to fill that position, then you should apply. Don't let the fact that you're a veteran stop you from pursuing your goals. So if you're struggling with any of these issues, please know that you're not alone. There are resources available to help you overcome these obstacles. And if you'd like to learn more about those resources, check out the description below. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Please like the video, and as always, thank you for your service. As our hero makes his way through the crowd, excitement builds. Where is he going? What is everyone gathered to see? Is it a parade? A celebration? And who is this mysterious figure? Let's find out. Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today, we are releasing an episode of our series. Do you like this kind of content? Then stay tuned for more. But without further ado, let's get into it. Behind the welcome banner. The crisp air vibrated with anticipation. Laughter echoed, mingling with the strains of a distant brass band. Bunting fluttered in the breeze, its colors a joyful explosion against the clear blue sky. It was a perfect day for a homecoming. At the end of the long driveway, nestled between two weeping willows, stood a weathered wooden house. Its roof, heavy with age, seemed to sag under the weight of countless stories it held within its sturdy frame. Today, though, it wasn't the house that was the center of attention, but rather the road leading up to it. Every few minutes, a car would rumble over the threshold, disgorging excited groups of people who surged forward, eager to catch the first glimpse of their returning hero. Children, their faces painted with excitement, danced in giddy anticipation, while adults exchanged warm smiles and animated hand gestures. The air buzzed with chatter, each person eager to share in the joy of the moment. Amongst them stood a young woman, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She clutched a bouquet of wildflowers so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her gaze, fixed on the road, saw not the vibrant colors or the waving crowds, but only the image of the figure she awaited. Her heart pounded in her chest, keeping time with the rhythmic cheers of the crowd. Then he appeared, his silhouette framed by the open car door. Time seemed to stop. All eyes were on him, the returning hero, the prodigal son, the young man who had captured the hearts of the town with his bravery and kindness. His name was Thomas Bell. He was 26 years old. Thomas was the kind of man who carried sunshine in his smile and laughter in his heart. His spirit was as boundless as the horizon, his dreams as vast as the open sky. When he was just 18, he had left their small town to chase his ambitions, promising to return someday with stories that would make their hearts soar and their eyes sparkle. He had been gone for 8 years, 8 long years filled with hopes, struggles, achievements, and heartaches. But now he was back to the place where his story began, back to the people who loved him, back to the life that had been put on hold. As he stepped out of the car, a resounding cheer went up from the crowd. It was a sound of pure elation, of joy unadulterated. His mother, her face etched with a lifetime of love and worry, rushed forward and enveloped him in the tightest hug ever. His father, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture that spoke volumes of the pride and relief he felt. Soon, Thomas found himself at the center of a swirling vortex of hugs, handshakes, and congratulations. Each person had a story to share, a memory to reminisce about, a piece of the puzzle that had been missing from their lives. For 8 long years he listened patiently, his heart swelling with affection and nostalgia. Finally, when the crowd thinned and the noise subsided, Thomas turned to look at the house. It looked different somehow, yet strangely familiar. Time had touched it gently, making it appear more venerable, more cherished. He walked towards the front door, each step echoing the rhythm of his heartbeat. As he climbed the steps and reached for the doorknob, a wave of emotions washed over him, memories, hopes, and dreams. He took a deep breath, steadied himself, and knocked. The door opened, and there she stood. The young woman from the crowd, the one with the wildflower. She stepped back surprised and delighted, her eyes widening in recognition. In that instant, all the years, all the miles, all the heartaches and struggles seemed to fade away. It was as if time itself had paused, allowing only them to exist in that one precious moment. Ellie. Thomas breathed, his voice hoarse with emotion. Ellie, her cheeks flushing, couldn't find her voice. She simply stared, her heart doing a wild jig in her chest. In the next instant, she was in his arms, the scent of home and hearth enveloping her. The years melted away, and it was as if they were teenagers again, whispering sweet nothings under the old oak tree at the corner of Elm Street. They clung to each other, 2 souls finding solace in the embrace of familiarity, their laughter echoing through the house, mingling with the sounds of the wind chimes hanging on the porch. Inside, the house was a tableau of half-forgotten memories and new beginnings. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. The furniture was well worn, each piece holding a silent testament to years of laughter, love, and life. Thomas and Ellie wandered through the rooms, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. They stood in the kitchen, the very spot where Thomas had learned to bake cookies with his mother, the flour-dusted countertop a silent witness to their shared history. They sat in the living room, the place where he and his brother had wrestled on cold winter nights, the worn rug muffling their joyous shouts. They climbed the creaking stairs, each step taking them closer to the bedrooms where dreams were spun and secrets whispered. As they reached Thomas's old room, a surge of memories flooded back. He remembered the posters on the walls, the trophies on the shelf, the desk where he had studied for exams, his mind filled with aspirations and dreams. Now, the room was different, yet the essence remained the same. It was a sanctuary of shared moments, a repository of laughter and camaraderie. Here, amidst the four walls that had witnessed his growth and aspirations, Thomas felt a profound sense of homecoming. It was as if the room itself had been waiting for him, patiently preserving the essence of his past self until this moment of reunion. As he stepped into the room, the years seemed to melt away. He could almost hear the echoes of his younger self, his laughter mingling with the soft creaks of the floorboards. He ran his fingers along the edge of the desk, feeling a connection to the boy he once was, the dreams he had nurtured, the goals he had set. It was a tangible link to his past, a reminder of how far he had come, yet a reassurance that some parts of him, his essence, had always remained. Thomas and Ellie sat on the edge of the bed, sharing stories, their voices weaving a tapestry of laughter and nostalgia. They spoke of the years that had passed, of the journeys they had taken, of the challenges they had faced. But through it all, their bond deepened, strengthened by the passage of time and the enduring power of their connection. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, Thomas and Ellie rose to their feet. Hand in hand, they walked to the window, gazing out at the star-studded sky. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the unspoken understanding that had grown between them over the years. And as the first stars twinkled above them, Thomas knew he was home. Home, not just because of the physical space, but because of the love, the connection, and the memories that filled every corner of this old house. It was here with Ellie, amidst the comforting familiarity of his childhood home, that Thomas truly felt he was where he belonged. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this episode of our series. Please don't forget to show your support. We'll be sure to return with another episode soon. Until then, take care and stay tuned. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm sitting in my bed and all of a sudden I hear this sound. Bang, 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 bang. It's a heavy machine gun. I sit up in bed and for a second I think, oh, we're under attack. Then I realize what it is. It's just the neighbor's fireworks. But I can't help myself. I still flinch when I hear them. And I keep thinking, are they coming at us? Are they shooting at us? Because that was the reality for me for 4 months out of every year for 5 years. I'm a soldier. This is my story. When I signed my contract to be in the Army, I knew that I would go to places I'd never been and experience things I'd never experienced. What I didn't know was that even when I came home, I would still be experiencing those things. I would still be hearing those sounds, seeing those sights, feeling those emotions. In some ways, being away from Afghanistan felt like being in a safe haven. I could walk down the street without being shot at. I could get into my car without having to duck for cover or fear a roadside bomb. I could turn on my water without worrying if it was clean. I could eat food without checking to make sure it wasn't poisoned. In many ways, coming home was supposed to be a relief, a return to normal life. Instead, it was like being dropped into an alternate universe where everything was strange and new. When I first got back, I had no idea how to cope with my experiences. I didn't have any idea what to do. The worst part was that nobody talked about it. Nobody said, "Hey, how are you doing? How are you coping?" They all acted like everything was normal and they expected me to be normal too. But I couldn't be normal. Not after what I'd seen. Not after what I'd done. Some days I would wake up in a cold sweat in the middle of the night. I'd be sitting there thinking, why am I sweating? Why am I so uncomfortable? And then it would come back to me. I would remember the faces of my dead friends. I would remember the terror of battle. And I would start shaking and crying. I've been in the Army for 10 years. I've deployed to some pretty hostile places, but I never really thought about it as being dangerous until I went to Afghanistan. It was a very different kind of war. It was against an enemy that you couldn't see. You couldn't tell who was the enemy and who was not the enemy. And it was more psychological than anything. One time we were driving down the road and we saw a group of people by the side of the road waving at us, giving us a thumbs up. And we stopped and we got out and we started talking to them. We were trying to help them. And then, all of a sudden, one of them pulled out a grenade and threw it at us. Luckily, my friend and I, we jumped back in the truck fast enough and we were able to drive off. We turned around and we looked, and the whole village that was behind them had disappeared. It was a ghost town. Another time we were walking through a village and we heard a woman screaming bloody murder. So we stopped and we asked, "What's wrong?" And she said her son had been killed. We went and we sat with her and we talked to her and tried to console her. And when we turned around to leave, she grabbed us and she started stabbing at us with a pair of scissors. The enemy could be anyone, anywhere, at any time. It made it very difficult to trust anyone. But that was the hardest part for me, not being able to trust the people around me. Sometimes when I'm in a crowd, I feel uneasy. I feel nervous. I look around me, try to take in my surroundings. I want to see all the exits. I'm always on guard for whatever may happen next. Sometimes I think maybe it's not such a good idea for me to be here. Maybe I should leave. Another thing that really affected me was the dust. The dust would get everywhere. It would get in your eyes, in your nose, in your mouth. It would get in your boots, and it would track into your living spaces. It would cover everything in a layer of dust. It was hard to keep anything clean. It was hard to keep yourself clean. And it didn't matter how much water you used, how much soap you used, you were still covered in dust. Sometimes when I smell certain smells, I'll have flashbacks to being in Afghanistan. Like when I smell diesel fuel, it reminds me of the trucks we drove. When I smell chlorine, it reminds me of the pools we would swim in. When I smell barbecue smoke, it reminds me of the burn pits that we would fly over, that we would run to get away from. And sometimes when I'm outside and I smell smoke, I think, oh my God, are we under attack? Am I in danger? I was also really affected by the heat. The heat was intense. It was dry. It was constant. It never let up. And it seemed to penetrate everything, including your body. No matter how much water you drank, no matter how much sunscreen you put on, the heat was relentless. And it seemed to sap your strength, your will, your sanity. And then there was the isolation. I was far from my family. I was far from my friends. I was far from everything I knew and loved. And it was hard to stay connected. It was hard to feel like I was a part of something bigger than myself. I missed my loved ones. I missed my life. I missed my country. But now, when I close my eyes, I can still see the faces of the people I met, the children, the elders, the families. I can still hear the sounds of the crickets, the birds, the wind, the laughter, the music. I can still feel the warmth of the sun, the sand, the earth, the breeze. I can still taste the spices, the flavors, the sweets, the teas. I can still smell the aromas, the incense, the flowers, the food, the dust. I can still hear the echoes of the front line even when I'm at home. But I'm grateful for those echoes. They remind me of who I am, where I've been, what I've done. They remind me of the sacrifices I've made, the challenges I've overcome, the lessons I've learned, the people I've helped. They remind me that I am a soldier. I've tried to talk to other soldiers about their experiences when they come home, and it's been difficult. A lot of them don't want to talk about it. They don't want to relive it. They don't want to remember it. And I understand that. But I also think that it's important to talk about it. I think it's important to share our experiences, our struggles, our challenges, our triumphs. I think it's important to let people know that they're not alone. I think the biggest thing that helped me was talking to somebody about my experiences. And I think if more soldiers did that, if more people understood what soldiers go through, we could all be better equipped to help them, to support them, to respect them, to honor them. Being a soldier is more than just a job. It's a way of life. It's a calling. It's a commitment. It's a sacrifice. It's a service. It's a duty. It's an honor. And being a soldier is not just about being strong, brave, disciplined, courageous. It's also about being human, vulnerable, emotional, compassionate, empathetic. Being a soldier is about being all of that and more. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. thank you." The crisp air of dawn carried the scent of fallen leaves and the distant smoke of a dying fire. It was the kind of morning that whispered tales of bravery and sacrifice, the perfect backdrop for a hero's return. General Maximus strode into the city, his chest heaving with each step. He wasn't marching, not really. Each footfall was more a testament to his exhaustion than a display of military might. His armor, usually polished to mirror-like shine, was now dulled with grime and sweat, mirroring the weariness in his eyes. Beside him, his soldiers shuffled, their faces etched with fatigue that mirrored his own. They had come home after the same battle that had etched their general's face into the memories of the city's folk. A battle that had tested their mettle, pushed them to the brink, a battle won by the skin of their teeth. A hush fell over the crowd as Maximus approached, their gazes a mixture of awe and adoration. He was their protector, the shield that had kept them safe from the invading horde. In that moment, he was their hero. But, as the cheers reverberated through the stone-lined streets, Maximus felt a hollowness within him that no amount of adulation could fill. For beneath the weight of his armor, his body ached in ways that transcended physical pain. Each step sent jolts of agony through him. The cheers of the crowd were muffled, distant, failing to penetrate the fog of torment that clouded his mind. Their hero was indeed returning, but he was returning broken. He was returning to a life he no longer recognized, a life that now seemed distant and alien like a half-remembered dream. What was once familiar had become a foreign landscape, and as he walked, he realized he wasn't just marching into the city, he was also marching into an abyss of memories, emotions, and sensations long suppressed. It was a homecoming, yes, but it was also a homecoming to himself, or what was left of him. Memories flickered at the edge of his consciousness, a haunting reminder of who he used to be. Glimpses of a life before the battles, before the weight of command had settled upon his shoulders. Faces swam before his eyes, voices echoed in his ears, each a phantom limb of a life he'd left behind. He saw the laughter of children, heard the gentle strum of a lute, smelled the sweet aroma of baking bread. Each sense a torment, a cruel jest of his senses that still functioned while the rest of him lay buried under layers of grief and loss. Amidst the crowd, a small hand tugged at his armor. He looked down to see a young boy gazing up at him with innocent admiration. "General," the boy whispered, his voice filled with awe, "you are our hero." Maximus met the child's gaze, a mirror to his former self. He, too, once looked up to those who wore the badge of courage with the same untainted admiration. He wanted to smile, to bend down and tell the boy how his day was going or ask about his family. But all he could muster was a tired nod. His throat was hoarse, his mouth dry. Even the simplest of interactions felt like deciphering an ancient text, as if years of silence had thickened his tongue, rendering it heavy and awkward. He longed to speak, to tell the boy about his hero, the one who lived in his heart, but the words were trapped, frozen in his chest, locked behind bars of pain. All he could offer was a semblance of a smile, a ghost of his former warmth. It was a sorry substitute for the hero the people imagined him to be. He continued his slow procession, each step laden with the weight of unspoken words, of emotions buried deep. With every glance, every whisper of admiration, his burden grew heavier. For they saw a hero, but they didn't see the silent torment that consumed him. They saw a warrior who had led them to victory, but they didn't see the warrior who was slowly fading away within the confines of his own mind. He was a hero by their standards, but according to his own, he had failed. Failed to protect his comrades, failed to save his kin, failed to shield his heart. Maximus had conquered kingdoms, led armies to victory, his name a legend on the lips of men. But in the solitude of his being, he was a failure. The scars that adorned his body were a testament to his battles, each one a grim reminder of lives lost, friends fallen. But his deepest scar was the one they couldn't see, the one that twisted in his gut, constricted his chest, the one that echoed in the hollow chambers of his heart. It was the silence that screamed the loudest, the silence of his pain, the silence of his memories, the silence of his soul. As he reached the palace, its grandeur mocking his own diminishing stature, he knew he wasn't welcome here anymore. This place, once a sanctuary, had become a tomb for his spirit. Within these four walls, he had shed the blood of kings, strategized with cunning lords, laughed with courtly ladies. But now he was a stranger here, an intruder in his own domain. Each room he passed through was a portal to a past he could no longer access, a past that now seemed like a faded tapestry, beautiful but out of reach. He ascended the throne, the very throne that had been his father's, his grandfather's, a legacy stretching back through ages. Yet as he sat there, the weight of the crown mocked him. It was a symbol of a life he no longer wanted, a life of duty, of endless responsibilities, of strategic marriages and political intrigues. He had donned this crown with pride, but now it felt like a shackle, binding him to a present he couldn't face and a future he dreaded. He was expected to rule, to make decrees, to shape the kingdom's fate. But all he wanted was to escape, to vanish into the oblivion of the horizon where pain had no echo and memories had no hold. He was a king in name, but in reality he was a prisoner in his own gilded cage, a captive audience to the relentless torment within. As night fell, casting long shadows across the kingdom, Maximus stood at the highest tower, the wind whipping his cloak around him like a shroud. Below him, the city glittered, unaware of the turmoil within their hero. He looked up at the star-studded sky, a vast canvas of peace that mocked his own unrest. Was this his punishment, he wondered, to be haunted by the silence of his pain, to be tormented by the echoes of his past? He had sought solace in the stars, finding comfort in their distant, unchanging light. They had been his constant companions in the darkest hours, bearing silent witness to his battles, his losses, his quiet despair. But tonight, even the stars seemed indifferent to his plight, their twinkling light cold and uninviting. He was a man stripped bare, his bravado discarded on the battlefields, leaving him raw and vulnerable in the face of his own demons. And as the wind howled around him, carrying with it the whispers of the departed, he felt utterly alone. In the silence of the night, his thoughts coalesced into a single, desperate question. Why? Why had he been spared when so many others had fallen? What purpose was he serving by living in this torment? He had lived a life of valor, yes, but now what? How did he reconcile the deafening silence within him with the clamoring expectations without? How did he bridge the chasm that had opened up within his soul? He was a man wrestling with existential questions, grappling with the futility of existence in the face of oblivion. His victories had once given him purpose, but now those, too, felt like distant echoes. The cheers of the crowd, the adulation of the masses, all of it seemed like a hollow charade. He was a puppet king, a mere figurehead dancing to the whims of fate. As the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, painting the sky in hues of blood orange and bruised purple, Maximus stood on the precipice of a new day, a day that promised nothing but the continuation of his silent torment. Below him, the kingdom stirred, preparing to greet the dawn with hope and anticipation. But he saw only the specters of his past in the rising sun. He was a man trapped between two worlds, the one he once knew and the one he now inhabited. And as the sun climbed higher, bathing the kingdom in its golden light, he knew he had a choice to make. He could continue to live in denial, clinging to the tattered remnants of his former life, or he could embrace his new reality, the one defined by silence and solitude. Either way, the sun rose, indifferent to his torment, indifferent to his choice, indifferent to his pain. For Maximus, the world was a stage, but he was no longer an actor. He was merely a spectator, condemned to watch his own life pass by. In this corner of the screen, there's a man in uniform standing at attention. It's an old black and white photo, but his eyes are still sharp and clear, piercing through time to stare directly at us. His lips are pursed into a thin line, his jaw set firm. He looks every bit the soldier. But those eyes tell another story, one of torment and anguish. This is who I was then. Now here I am again, but I'm not a soldier anymore. Instead of combat boots, I wear dress shoes that make my feet sweat. My uniform has been replaced with a suit and tie. 1,000 unspoken words hang heavy between these two versions of myself. It feels like a lifetime ago that I wore that other uniform. Yet the memories it represents still feel raw, open wounds on my soul. I'm a veteran, a former paratrooper. The world sees me as a hero, someone who served their country, defended its people. They don't see the scars that run deeper than skin. They don't hear the echoes of explosions that still haunt my sleep. Sometimes, when the shadows stretch long and the silence is too loud, I hear the screams of fallen brothers. Sometimes I feel their hands gripping mine, their voices begging for help, their life essence seeping into my own. And no amount of therapy or medication can wash away those memories. When I took the oath, I vowed to protect and defend. It was drilled into me from the moment I stepped foot into basic training. We were taught to follow orders without question, to put our lives on the line without hesitation. I did just that. I followed orders. I fought, I bled, I killed. That's what we're trained to do, to be the first line of defense, to stand between the battlefield and the safety of home. But who stands between a veteran like me and the demons of war? Who protects me from the invisible wounds that linger long after the battles are over? The truth is, nobody. Nobody signed up to serve alongside me through the long nights filled with nightmares, the days drowned in depression, the years lost in substance abuse. It's a lonely battle. Coming home wasn't easy. The streets felt alien. The faces, the sounds, the smells, all of it was foreign. I carried the weight of my experiences like a second skin. I couldn't shed it, not then and not now. And people stared. They saw the medals on my chest and whispered, "Hero." But they didn't understand the cost of those accolades. They didn't see the toll it took on me. For some, war becomes a way of life. It doesn't matter if you fight on the front lines or behind the desk. The impact is the same. I've seen things that would break a lesser person, watched friends become ghosts, made choices that still haunt me. I have regrets, big ones. I wish I could go back, undo them, change them. But regret is a luxury I can't afford. My wife and kids don't know any of this. They don't know the half of it. To them, I am simply Dad, someone who gets up early, fixes breakfast, drives them to school, attends parent-teacher meetings, cheers at soccer games, reads bedtime stories. I am the quintessential father, husband, family man. I love being this. I cherish it. There are mornings when the darkness threatens to consume me, memories I can't escape. But then I see their smiling faces, and it's a reminder of why I fight to keep going. I joined the military straight out of high school. I was young, barely 18, full of idealism and a sense of duty. It was ingrained in me from an early age. Serve your country, protect your people. It was the right thing to do. My grandfather had been a World War II veteran. My father, a career sergeant major, had seen multiple tours of duty. I grew up surrounded by stories of valor and sacrifice. When September 11th happened, my resolve only hardened. I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. I wanted to honor my heritage, serve my country. So here I am, the embodiment of conflicting realities. On one side, the soldier who saw hell and came back. On the other, the civilian trying to build a life. It's a tightrope walk between duty and family, between loyalty and peace. I used to think I could outrun my past, that with enough effort, I could bury the memories beneath the normalcy of family life. But the past has a funny way of catching up. It often takes me by surprise when my past self intrudes into my present. It could be the simplest of things. like the sound of thunder that reminds me of artillery fire, the flash of a camera that triggers the memory of a fallen comrade. I startle easily. I flinch at sudden movements. And sometimes when the night is quiet, too quiet, I hear whispers in the dark, voices that call my name. And then I wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. My wife, bless her, has been patient. She holds me as I relive the horrors of war, soothes me with her love until I'm anchored back to reality. I try to be stoic, to hide it, to be the strong one, the provider, the rock of the family. But sometimes the facade cracks. Sometimes the memories threaten to drown me, and I find myself lying on the floor, a grown man sobbing uncontrollably, haunted by the ghosts that refuse to rest. There are days when the weight of my past is almost unbearable. Days when I question why. Why me? Why this burden? I miss the camaraderie of my brothers in arms, the shared glances, the inside jokes. I miss the structure, the purpose, the feeling of belonging. Sometimes I feel like I'm living two lives, neither fully present. In one world, I'm a warrior, forever changed by the battles I've fought. In the other, I'm a family man, trying to piece together the shattered fragments of my psyche. I search for solace in the eyes of my children, their innocence a beacon in the darkness. I see myself in them, their potential, their dreams, their fears. I want to shield them from the harsh realities of the world, yet how can I, when I'm still battling my own demons? I work hard to be a good father, to provide for my family, to give them the life I never had. But the specter of my past looms over us, threatening to tear us apart. They say that every soldier carries a piece of the battlefield within them. Well, I carry more than my fair share. I've buried so many pieces of myself along the way, compartmentalized the horrors to keep them at bay. But the truth is, they're always there, just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to resurface. I wrestle with feelings of guilt and shame. Guilt for the life I left behind, for the opportunities I missed, for the person I used to be. Shame for the things I've done, for the choices I made, for the darkness that still lingers within. Some days, the guilt and shame threaten to consume me. It's a heavy burden to bear, heavier than any pack I've ever carried on a soldier. But I have to keep moving forward. For my sake, for theirs, I owe it to myself to heal, to find peace. I owe it to my family to be the best husband and father I can be. I owe it to my brothers in arms who didn't come home. I owe it to the fallen to live a life that honors their sacrifice. I was once a soldier, trained to follow orders, to put my life on the line without hesitation. But now I face a different kind of battle, a battle within myself. I may be caught between two worlds, but I will find my way. I have to. Because in the end, it's not just about me. It's about coming home to the ones who need me, the ones who love me, the ones who make my life worth fighting for. It's about finding peace so I can finally lay down my burdens and rest. This is my story. I was born in a small town, grew up in a bigger city. My dad's side of the family had come to the States from Italy about 70 years ago, and my mom's side had been here for generations. I have two brothers, one older, one younger. We were close as kids. The three of us would do everything together. We would ride our bikes all around the neighborhood, go swimming at the local pool during the summer, play football in the park. It was great. Our parents never fought. They always worked. So it was just kind of like we had this wonderful, perfect life. When I turned 17, I enlisted in the Marine Corps. I did not want to be a burden on my parents, so I didn't really tell them much about what I was feeling or how I was thinking. All I told them was that I wanted to join the Marines. I think they thought I could handle it. They thought it was going to be fine because I was a good kid. I went through boot camp at Paris Island, and then I was sent to my first duty station, which was Camp Lejeune. A few months after I got there, I found out I was being deployed to Iraq. I remember calling my parents and telling them, and my mom started crying. She was devastated. She tried to convince me to try and get out of going, but when it came down to it, I didn't want to be a coward. I wanted to do my duty. I remember looking at my mom and telling her, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll be fine." And she just cried harder. We were in Iraq for about 6 months. I don't really remember much about the first 5 months because I was on a constant state of alert. We were fighting pretty much every day. But the last month there, things really started to settle down. And that's when I started to feel something inside of me snap. That's when I started having these panic attacks, these moments where I just felt this overwhelming sense of dread and fear, and I would start shaking and sweating, and I couldn't control myself. I tried to talk to my sergeants about it. I was sent to sick call a couple of times. They gave me some pills, but none of it helped. I was medicated for about 2 weeks, and then I was back in the fight. A couple of months later, I was sent home. When I arrived at my parents' house, I remember hugging my mom so tightly because I just wanted to feel her embrace. I wanted to feel safe. I had nightmares for months, maybe even years. I couldn't sleep unless I was in a place where I felt safe. Even then, I still jump at loud noises. To this day, I still flinch if someone surprises me by coming up behind me. I used to walk everywhere with my head up, looking around, making sure I wasn't being followed. It was exhausting. I missed so much of my brother's wedding because I was so anxious that I couldn't control my breathing. I couldn't speak. I couldn't eat. I remember sitting on the side watching everyone celebrate and thinking, how are they so happy? How can they be so carefree? It was eating away at me. And as time passed, I started to isolate myself. I stopped seeing my friends. I stopped going out. I stopped talking to my family. I was just in my room playing video games and trying to forget. I became angry and bitter towards the world. I didn't know why I was having these feelings, so I just pushed everyone away. And that's when my parents started to worry. My dad would knock on my door every night asking if I was okay. He would sit in my room with me until I fell asleep. My mom would make him stop because he was making me uncomfortable. But then my mom would come in and she would ask me questions. She would try to make conversation. She would tell me jokes, anything to get me to smile again. It killed me to see my mom hurt. I wanted to tell her that it was my fault, that I was the reason she was upset, but I couldn't. All I could do was keep pushing her away. It took me a while to realize that I had PTSD. At the time, no one really talked about mental health. No one understood it. No one knew how to deal with it. So I just dealt with it on my own. I tried to bury it deep inside of me. I tried to pretend it wasn't there. But it was always there, lurking underneath, waiting to come out. A few years later, I met someone. I won't mention any names. I was in a really dark place at the time. I didn't think I deserved anyone's love. I didn't think I could ever be happy again. But she didn't care. She saw past all my scars and she loved me anyway. I didn't want to bring her down with me. I didn't want to drag her into my darkness, but I couldn't help myself. I needed someone to save me. I just didn't know it yet. She was the best thing that happened to me. I mean, she still is. She saved me. I don't know where I'd be without her. I started to open up to her about what I was going through. I told her about my nightmares, my panic attacks, my isolation. And she was amazing. She was supportive. She held me when I cried. She made me laugh when I was sad. She never gave up on me. One day, I decided I needed to seek professional help. I found a therapist and I started seeing him. Going to therapy was the best thing I ever did. It gave me the tools I needed to cope with my PTSD. It gave me a safe space to talk about my experiences without feeling judged or misunderstood. It gave me a better understanding of myself and my emotions. I learned that it was okay to be vulnerable. I learned that it was okay to ask for help. I learned that it was okay to forgive myself. I know that I'll never fully overcome PTSD. It's a part of me now. It's a part of who I am. And that's okay. I've learned to accept it. I've learned to live with it. I've learned to use it to make me a better person. I'm not defined by my scars. I'm defined by how I choose to live my life. So if you're struggling with PTSD, please know that you're not alone. There is help available. You can get better. It just takes time. It takes patience. It takes a lot of hard work. But it's worth it. Don't give up on yourself. Please reach out for help. Thank you for listening to my story. If you're a veteran or currently serving and you're struggling with PTSD, please reach out for help. You don't have to deal with this alone. Here are some resources, and if you're not a veteran but you're struggling with PTSD, please reach out for help. You don't have to deal with this alone. Here are some resources. Thank you. Hello, and welcome back to another episode. Thank you for joining me. If you're new here, it's my hope that you find some insight or understanding from this video and that it helps you with your personal growth. Please subscribe if you enjoy what you see. And let's begin. The smiles that hide the pain. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you had to fake a smile? What about situations where you felt like you had no choice but to be happy? In these moments, your true feelings are buried under a layer of forced positivity. You feel like an actor on a stage, performing for an audience without an exit strategy. But it's not just you. Everyone around you is doing the same. They're putting on their own masks to fit in and be accepted. No one dares to speak up because doing so would shatter the illusion. It's easy to get lost in this cycle of pretense, especially when you don't have a support system. When no one is there to help you find your way out of the labyrinth of deceit, it can feel like you're trapped in a never-ending performance. But even in the darkest of times, there's always a glimmer of hope. You can break free from the chains of societal expectations and live a life that's true to who you are. It won't be easy, but the journey is worth it. So, take the first step towards freedom. Let's discuss 6 ways smiles that hide the pain. Number 1, you may not realize it now, but there's a good reason why they say laughter is the best medicine. Humor has the power to transcend social barriers, making it an effective tool for masking our true emotions. When we crack a joke or tell a funny story, we become the center of attention and the focus shifts away from our sadness. Laughter can also trigger the release of endorphins, which have mood-boosting effects. It's almost as if our bodies are programmed to find humor in difficult situations. When life gets tough, we laugh to cope. This is not only a survival mechanism, but also a way to maintain a sense of normalcy in the face of adversity. By pretending to be happy, we convince ourselves that everything is fine, even if it isn't. We tell ourselves stories to make sense of the senseless. We create narratives that explain why we are the way we are and why things happened the way they did. These stories often have a happy ending, even if the reality is far from it. We convince ourselves that we are lucky, blessed, or chosen, but deep down, we know that these are just coping mechanisms. 2. The weight of unspoken trauma. Silence can be deafening, especially when it comes to unspoken trauma. Some scars run deeper than others, leaving wounds that refuse to heal. Childhood trauma is a heavy burden to carry, and its impact can reverberate throughout our lives. It can make us feel isolated, ashamed, and afraid. As we grow older, we learn to bury our pain and pretend that everything is fine. We put on a brave face and try to move on, but the trauma follows us like a shadow. It lurks beneath the surface, waiting to be triggered by a careless word or sudden movement. Unspoken trauma can lead to a range of negative outcomes, including anxiety, depression, and addiction. It can also cause physical health problems such as chronic pain and autoimmune disorders. But despite the challenges, it is possible to overcome the weight of unspoken trauma. With the right support and resources, we can learn to process our emotions and develop healthy coping mechanisms. Healing from trauma takes time, but it is possible. Number 3, the fear of being judged. Have you ever felt like you couldn't share your true feelings with others? Fear of judgment can be a powerful force that keeps us from being honest about how we feel. It can prevent us from expressing our emotions, seeking help, or reaching out for support. This fear can stem from various sources, such as past experiences of ridicule or rejection, cultural norms that discourage vulnerability, or a lack of trust in others. But suppressing our emotions does not make them disappear. Instead, it can lead to negative consequences such as increased stress, anxiety, and even physical health problems. To overcome the fear of judgment, it is essential to cultivate self-awareness, challenge negative beliefs, and seek support from trusted individuals. Building a strong support system can provide the necessary safety net to express our true feelings without fear of reprisal. It can also be helpful to practice self-compassion and acceptance, recognizing that everyone makes mistakes and that our worth is not determined by our imperfections. 4. The pressure to conform. Conformity is a powerful force that can shape our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. When we are faced with social pressure, we often feel compelled to comply in order to be accepted and avoid rejection. This can be particularly challenging when we are struggling with mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, or trauma, as we may feel even more isolated and misunderstood. However, conforming to societal expectations can have serious consequences for our mental well-being. When we hide our true selves, we are essentially denying our reality and suppressing our emotions. This can lead to increased feelings of shame, guilt, and self-hatred. But we have the power to resist the pressure to conform. By seeking out communities that accept and support us for who we are, we can find the strength to embrace our true selves. It may take time and courage, but the rewards of living an authentic life are immeasurable. Number 5. Fear of losing control. Anxiety can be a crippling force, paralyzing us with worry and doubt. It can make us feel like we are at the mercy of our thoughts and emotions, unable to function in everyday life. But anxiety doesn't have to rule our lives. By understanding the root of our fears and developing coping mechanisms, we can regain control and live a more fulfilling life. One way to manage anxiety is through exercise. Physical activity releases endorphins that can improve our mood and reduce stress. Another effective method is practicing mindfulness and grounding techniques, which can help us stay present and focused on the here and now. Seeking professional help can also provide us with tools and strategies to overcome our fears and live a life that we are proud of. Remember, we have the power to overcome anxiety and live a life that we are proud of. Number 6. The illusion of perfection. Societal pressures can be overwhelming, especially when it comes to portraying an image of perfection. Many of us feel the need to hide our flaws and weaknesses, fearing that others will judge us if they knew the truth. But this constant pressure to appear perfect can take a toll on our mental health. It can lead to feelings of inadequacy, low self-esteem, and even depression. But it's important to remember that perfection is an illusion. No one is perfect, and we all have flaws. Trying to live up to unrealistic standards set by society or others can be a recipe for disaster. Instead, we should focus on accepting ourselves for who we are, flaws and all. Practicing self-compassion and building a support system of friends and family who accept and love us can help us break free from the chains of societal expectations. Smiles that hide the pain. In conclusion, behind every smile, there's a story waiting to be told. A story of resilience, strength, and the unwavering spirit of humanity. It's a story that reminds us that even in the darkest of times, hope is not lost. While it's natural to want to hide our pain and pretend to be happy, it's important to remember that we are not alone. Reaching out for help and connecting with others who understand what we're going through can make a world of difference. By sharing our stories, we can break the stigma surrounding mental health issues and inspire others to seek the help they deserve. So let's raise awareness, show compassion, and support those who are struggling. Let's create a world where everyone feels comfortable enough to remove their mask and embrace their true selves. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. If you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on new videos. Take care and see you soon. It's been 3 months since Lieutenant Commander Charles Reynolds, better known as Charlie, had stepped foot on U.S. soil. 3 months since he'd seen his daughter run across the lawn toward him, jump into his arms and ask, "Daddy, why do you smell like that?" 3 months since he'd held her tiny hand and told her about the bad guys he was fighting so she could sleep safer in her bed. 3 months since he'd held his wife close and told her how much he loved her, not knowing if he'd ever see her again. He was home now, but he wasn't at peace. The battlefield might have been thousands of miles away, but the war continued to rage inside him. He tossed restlessly in his sleep, sweat plastering his body to the sheets, his breaths coming in harsh gasps. A nightmare again, another life taken, the same pleas for help echoing in his ears. A hand shook his shoulder gently. "Charlie, honey, you okay? You were screaming." His wife's voice, soft, worried, reaching through the fog of his nightmare. It took him a moment to find her in the darkness, her face creased with concern. "Yeah," he croaked, his throat raw. "Sorry, love you, go back to sleep." He knew he'd never be able to tell her what he'd seen, what he'd done. All he could hope for was that one day she'd understand why he'd chosen to become a Navy SEAL. As the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Charlie got up and went to the window. The familiar surroundings brought a sense of comfort, but it was short-lived. Outside, children played, their laughter echoing in the crisp morning air. Inside, his daughter slept, oblivious to the horrors that haunted her father's waking hours. 3 months ago, he'd left for deployment, leaving behind the life he cherished for one filled with danger and uncertainty. Now he was back, yet he couldn't shake off the feeling that a part of him was still overseas, trapped in a war zone. He walked into the kitchen, the smell of coffee mingling with the sweet aroma of pancakes. His wife turned from the stove, a smile lighting up her face. "Morning, sleepyhead. You need some coffee?" "Yeah, thanks," he said, forcing a smile. He didn't want to dampen the mood, but the effort it took to maintain this facade, to hide the turmoil within him, was exhausting. Over breakfast, they talked about his trip, the journey home. He told her about the long flights, the layover in Germany, anything to avoid discussing the reality of his experiences. As he spoke, he noticed his daughter watching him, her big, blue eyes curious. "Daddy, when are you going away again?" she asked, her voice innocent, her words like shards of glass piercing his heart. "Not for a long time, sweetheart," he replied, his voice strained. He didn't want to scare her, but he couldn't lie either. The truth was, he never really knew when he'd be called away again. Her question hung in the air, unanswered. Charlie pushed away his plate, the remnants of his breakfast growing cold. He needed to get out of the house, go for a run, let the rhythm of his feet on the pavement drown out the echoes of the battlefield in his head. "I'm going for a run," he told his wife, more to fill the silence than because he wanted to talk. He didn't wait for a reply. He just went out the door, the familiar routine of his training taking over. As he ran, the world blurred around him. There was just him and the road stretching endlessly ahead. The familiar streets, the trees lining them, all seemed distant, unreal. He was running, but he wasn't really moving forward. He was stuck in a loop, reliving the horrors of the past 3 months. He remembered the faces of his fallen comrades, their laughter and camaraderie now a distant memory. He remembered the weight of the rifle in his hands, the feel of the cool night air on his skin as he patrolled, always on the lookout for the next mission, the next threat. He remembered the dust, the endless dust that coated everything and everyone, turning day into night, making each breath a struggle. He remembered the sounds, the distant rumble of gunfire, the cries of wounded soldiers, the constant hum of generators in the background. He remembered the fear, the gnawing, ever-present fear that had become his constant companion. The fear of losing a life, of being ambushed, of failing his team, of returning home in body but not in spirit. And then there were the faces of the locals, the Afghan villagers whose lives they'd come to serve and protect. He remembered the pleading eyes of the mother who'd lost her son to the war, the gratitude in the smile of the village elder, the innocence of children playing amidst the ruins. Each memory was a punch to the gut, bringing him to his knees, reminding him of the cost of war, the human cost. He stumbled, falling to his knees in the middle of the street. His chest heaved, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. He wanted to scream, to let out all the pain, the anger, the fear that had been bottled up inside him for so long. But no sound came out. He was in too deep, trapped in the quicksand of his memories. Slowly he got up, leaning against a tree for support. The image of his daughter's smiling face flashed in his mind, her trust in him, her innocence, a stark contrast to the horrors he'd witnessed. He had to get a hold of himself. He had a family to protect, a life to rebuild. He walked slowly, then faster, then broke into a jog, the rhythm of his steps gradually becoming steadier. The sun beat down on his back, but he didn't feel its warmth. He was running, but it wasn't just his body that moved. His mind was running too, trying to outrun the demons that haunted him. He ran until he reached the river, its water sparkling in the sunlight. He stood there for a moment, watching the current flow, carrying away all that was broken and bent. He closed his eyes, letting the wind tousle his hair, carrying away the screams of the dying, the stench of decay, the taste of fear. When he opened his eyes, they were filled with a new resolve. He was home now, and this time he would stay. He would fight for his peace, for his daughter's smile, for his wife's love. He would heal, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. With a newfound determination, he turned back, the river and his journey home marking a turning point. He had a long way to go, but he was taking the first step. This is going to be a bit different. The battlefield is invisible, the enemy intangible. What's happening inside this man's mind will test his strength more than any combat ever could. But first, who is he? And how did he get here? Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the channel where we share with you inspiring stories from the world of special operations and the special people who make it their life's work. His name is Carlos Lechuga, a retired U.S. Army Special Forces officer with 26 years of service under his belt. He's written several books, notably the best-selling Mental Toughness Training for Law Enforcement and the Military. This guy knows his stuff, so when he talks about the power of the mind, we tend to listen. In one of his interviews, he shared a story about a soldier, not his real name, but John Doe nonetheless. A young man who grew up on a farm in Kansas. Like most kids on farms, he was taught the value of hard work early on. When you grow up around animals, you learn that they don't care whether or not you had breakfast. They need to be fed. You can't let them down. No matter what time it is, no matter how tired you are, you take care of your responsibilities because that's who you are. And that's the kind of person that makes a great Green Beret. So, at 18, John went off to serve his country. After some time in Ranger School and Special Forces training, he found himself ready for his first assignment in Afghanistan. In the deserts of Kandahar, John's team lived among the local villages trying to win the hearts and minds of the Afghan people. That meant living in substandard conditions alongside them, eating whatever food they had to offer, sharing their smiles and their hardships. It was tough, but it was also an incredible experience. Then one day, everything changed. John's team was in a fierce firefight. Rounds whizzed past him. He could hear the screams of his comrades being hit. Adrenaline surged through him as he took cover behind a nearby rock. Suddenly, a rocket-propelled grenade flew towards him. John dove to the side just in time. The RPG hit the spot where he had been lying only seconds before. He looked down to see the rock he'd been hiding behind obliterated. If he'd been a few seconds slower, he would have been dead. John's team regrouped and returned fire, eventually driving the enemy away. They had won the battle, but in the aftermath, John's world felt different. His heart pounded against his ribs like a drum solo. His breathing was shallow and rapid, and suddenly the familiar surroundings seemed alien and threatening. He couldn't shake this feeling of dread. He kept replaying the near-death experience in his head, each time feeling the surge of terror all over again. He tried to tell his team leader, "I think I got one." But all that came out was a panicked whisper. When he finally got back to base, he noticed that his hands were shaking. Sleep evaded him, and simple tasks like eating became monumental hurdles. Days turned into weeks, and still he struggled. Then he received orders. His team was deploying again, this time to Iraq. As he prepared to leave, John visited the base psychiatrist. He explained what he'd been through and how he felt. But after listening, the doctor merely shrugged and handed him a prescription. "Take this. It will help," he said dismissively. John didn't want to admit it, but the doctor was right. He needed help. But there was a problem. John's world had shrunk to the size of his fears. Leaving that base and going anywhere felt like a Herculean task. All he could do was worry about the next RPG or the next ambush, constantly scanning the horizon for danger, even though he was surrounded by the safety of his own people. When John spoke to his team leader, he was told, "You're overreacting. It's just a job." And although he understood those words, he knew they weren't true. He wasn't just a soldier. He was now a different kind of soldier, one who was waging war against something invisible. His mind was the new battlefield. The enemy was an unseen opponent, one that lurked in the shadows of his thoughts, whispering doubts and amplifying fears. This was PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, an invisible wound that a soldier can carry home long after their tour of duty ends. This soldier was now facing his greatest challenge yet, a fight that would test him in ways he never imagined. John found himself questioning everything. Every noise startled him. Every face in the crowd seemed like a threat. Simple tasks like crossing the street became daunting obstacles courses. And the worst part, he knew no one could see what he was going through. It was an internal struggle that threatened to consume him. The funny thing is that soldiers are trained to deal with physical pain with injuries and wounds that are visible. There's a protocol for everything. But mental health issues, they're a whole different ballgame. There's no field manual for this. Yet John was far from alone. Across the United States, hundreds of thousands of veterans were grappling with similar silent battles. Some turned to alcohol or drugs to numb the pain. Others withdrew into themselves, unable to cope with the invisible monster that haunted their thoughts. A few were fortunate enough to find support, understanding ears that listened without judgment and helping hands that reached out without pity. John was lucky to find help in his wife, Maria. She saw the toll that this war was taking on him, and she refused to let him slip away. She was his anchor, his reason to keep going. Together, they faced the darkness. She helped him break out of his shell, coaxing him to seek professional help, and slowly, very slowly, he began to heal. It was a long and arduous journey, but with each passing day, John grew stronger. He reconnected with friends, started exercising, and most importantly, he began to forgive himself. He realized that he wasn't weak. He was wounded. And this is what Carlos, the retired Special Forces officer, wants us all to understand. PTSD is not a sign of weakness. It's a response to extraordinary circumstances. The unseen wounds of war can be just as real and just as debilitating as any physical injury. How many of us have faced invisible battles, not on a foreign battlefield, but within the labyrinth of our own minds? How many of us have grappled with trauma, grief, or anxiety, feeling like we're fighting an unseen enemy? It's important to note that this isn't just a story about soldiers. It's a story about anyone who has ever endured trauma. First responders, victims of abuse, survivors of accidents, all of us who have ever felt the sting of emotional scars. Just like John, many of us retreat into ourselves, seeking solace in isolation, hoping the world will just go away. But as Carlos points out, this only worsens the situation. It's like trying to outrun a shadow. The more you run, the longer the shadow becomes. What's the solution? Carlos doesn't give us an easy answer, but he does tell us that reaching out is the first step to healing. Just like John, we have to find our anchors, those people who can help us navigate the choppy waters of trauma. We need to talk, to share our stories, to remind ourselves that we're not alone. We also have to challenge the stigma surrounding mental health issues. This is something Carlos is particularly passionate about. He wants us to stop labeling people as weak or loser or any other derogatory terms. These words only add to the burden that these individuals are already carrying. If you're a veteran or know one, please consider reaching out to organizations like the Special Operations Warrior Foundation or the National Center for PTSD. If you're not a veteran, please consider donating to these organizations. Your donation can be a lifeline for someone who is struggling in silence. As we close this video, let's remember the bravery of those who serve, not just on the battlefield, but also in the battle against invisible wounds. Let's honor their sacrifice by supporting them, by listening to them, and by helping them heal. Because the truth is, our soldiers deserve more than just our thanks. They deserve our empathy, our understanding, and our unwavering support. They deserve a community that rallies around them, not casts them out. They deserve a nation that salutes them, not just on Veterans Day, but every day. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. Thank you to our supporters whose names you can see on screen right now. We'll be back next week with another Special Operations story. The wind whispered tales of fallen comrades through the long grass, each blade a silent sentinel marking the graves of dreams left behind. The sky, a bruised purple canvas stretched taut over the horizon, mirrored the turmoil in Staff Sergeant Ben Logan's heart. 5 years he'd spent overseas, 5 years of deafening explosions, the metallic tang of blood, and the haunting cries of wounded men. But this homecoming was proving to be a different kind of battle. One fought not with guns and grenades, but with memories that refused to stay buried, and a silence so profound it echoed the emptiness within him. His wife, Sarah, stood on the porch, her silhouette framed by the warm glow of the porch light. Time had been kind to her. The freckled girl he'd married was now a woman, her face softened by the passage of time, her smile still as radiant as the day they met. He wanted to call out to her, to tell her he was here, to see the surprise, the joy bloom on her face. But his throat was a desert, dry and cracked, the words catching in his chest like birds with broken wings. He wasn't sure how long he just stood there, rooted to the spot like a statue of grief, watching her, not seeing the years melt away. He was back in the foxholes of Afghanistan, the parched earth baking under the unforgiving sun. Beside him, Private Walker lay slumped against a sandbag, his face contorted in a silent scream. Then the world shifted. The smell of honeysuckle and freshly cut grass replaced the stench of cordite and decay, and the sound of crickets replaced the distant drone of enemy fire. But the image of Walker's lifeless eyes remained seared into his brain. He shook his head, trying to clear the memory, the guilt, the overwhelming sense of responsibility that had become his constant shadow. It wasn't supposed to be like this. He'd made it home. He should be happy. He should be throwing open the door, striding into the house and wrapping Sarah in the tightest hug ever. But his feet seemed cemented to the ground, his body heavy as lead, his emotions a tangled mess that made no sense. When Sarah finally turned, her eyes searching the road, he forced himself to move. Each step toward the house felt like wading through knee-deep water. He tried to smile, to mimic the joy he felt when he'd first laid eyes on her at the county fair, when he'd known, despite the teasing laughter of friends, that she was the one for him. But the smile felt alien on his face, a grotesque parody of happiness. She was at the top of the porch steps in an instant, her arms around his neck, her face buried in his shoulder. And for a moment, all the noise, all the pain, all the memories receded. He held her close, breathing in her scent, feeling the warmth of her body against his, grounding him to the present, reminding him that this was real, that he was really home. "You're here," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You're really here." He nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He could feel her trembling, the tension in her shoulders, the tightness of her grip on him. She was crying. He pulled back, cupping her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had escaped. Her skin was as soft as he remembered, as warm, and he felt a surge of protectiveness, a fierce love that ached with the effort of holding back the tide. He didn't deserve her, not after what he'd seen, not after the things he'd done. How could he have survived so much loss and returned whole? What parts of him had been lost in the abyss of war? He wanted to tell her about the nightmares that haunted his sleep, the ones that clung to him like burrs, pulling him under, drowning him in their icy grip. He wanted to tell her about the faces of the fallen, the whispers of their families, the silent screams that echoed in the dead of night. But the words caught in his throat, turning to ash on his tongue. Instead, he held her tighter, burying his face in her hair, breathing in her scent, trying to convince himself that it was enough. He couldn't protect her from the darkness within him, but he could shield her from the scars that war had etched onto his soul. At least for now, maybe. As the days passed, the silence in the house grew louder, amplifying every creak of the floorboards, every sigh, every cough. It pressed against Ben, suffocating him, a constant reminder of the chasm that had opened up between him and Sarah. It wasn't just the memories that ached. It was the fear that Sarah would see him, not as the hero she'd waited 5 years to bring home, but as a broken man. He tried to fill the silence with laughter, to build bridges over the growing divide. He told stories of his comrades, of daring missions and close calls, anything to keep the focus away from himself. He could see the polite smile on Sarah's face, the flicker of concern in her eyes, but never a question, never a probing look that might have revealed the truth of his wounds. One evening, while the grill sizzled outside and the air filled with the scent of barbecue, Ben found himself cornered by Sarah's parents. Their smiles were kind, their eyes full of questions that sliced through him like shards of glass. They wanted to hear about his experiences, about the war, and he saw the reflection of their expectations in their eyes. They wanted to hear about bravery, about sacrifice, about heroism. But what could he tell them? About the day Private Jackson had died, his hand clasped tightly in Ben's, his eyes wide with terror, whispering, "I'm scared," even as Ben screamed for help into the void? Or about the time they'd come under fire, pinned down by the enemy, their only escape route blocked by a burning Humvee? Could he tell them about the searing guilt he'd felt when Staff Sergeant Miller had taken a bullet meant for him, or about the crushing despair that followed? Ben managed a tight smile, a strained laugh. He talked about the camaraderie, about the resilience of the human spirit, about the beauty of the Afghan landscape. He carefully crafted a narrative of heroism, leaving out the horrors that had stained his soul. As he spoke, he could feel their pride swelling, their eyes shining with admiration. He was a hero, it seemed, or at least that's what he was expected to be. But the weight of their expectations, of everyone's expectations, pressed down on him, suffocating him. That night, when he lay in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, the silence deafening, he cried. He cried for the fallen comrades whose names he couldn't even recall, for the innocence he'd lost, for the nightmares that wouldn't cease. He cried for the boy who'd looked up at him with trust in his eyes, for the life that had been before the war, for the hope that now seemed like a distant, fading star. Sarah stirred beside him, her arm finding his, her fingers tightening around his. He could feel her warmth, her presence anchoring him to the present. Maybe he thought, maybe she'd understand if he just explained, if he just peeled back the layers of his pain, of his guilt, of his fear. Maybe she could help him navigate the labyrinth of his mind. Maybe together they could find the way back to each other. But the thought was a whisper lost in the storm. How could he explain the unexplainable? How could he make her see the darkness that now defined him? Or would she recoil in horror, her love turning to pity, then revulsion? He wasn't sure he wanted to find out. The next morning, he woke to the insistent chirping of birds, the promise of a new day hanging in the air. He turned to Sarah, her face serene in the morning light, her chest rising and falling steadily. He watched her, wondering if she, too, had cried herself to sleep, wondering if she understood the torment that racked his soul. He knew he couldn't keep living like this, hiding behind a facade, burying his pain deeper. He had to tell her, he realized. Tell her everything. It would hurt, but it was the only way forward, the only way to bridge the gap that threatened to swallow them both. He got up, the silence amplifying the creak of the floorboards. He went to the bathroom, splashed water on his face, the cold water bringing a jolt of clarity. When he returned to the bedroom, Sarah was awake, her eyes searching his. "We need to talk," he said, his voice rough. She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know," she whispered, and as the sun streamed through the window, bathing the room in a golden light, Staff Sergeant Ben Logan began the arduous journey of bringing his wife back to him, of showing her the man he'd become, of making her understand the silent battles he'd fought and continued to wage within his own mind.